It's time now for another video presentation as we look at one of the biggest and most constant threats posed to supply chains by both organised and opportunist cargo thieves. The pursuit of theft-attractive products by organised crime groups in particular is unrelenting, and they are quick to capitalise on any perceived supply chain vulnerabilities. The catalyst for the surge in so-called jump-up thefts, which have plagued supply chains over the last few years, was a change to the distribution landscape, particularly of products such as tobacco, presenting an opportunity that criminal groups were quick to act upon. Now, in this special video presentation, Stuart Taylor, channel partner and account manager at Maple, looks at the challenges presented by jump-up thefts and discusses how operators are fighting back against this growing threat. So let's listen in. Stuart, over to you.
Hello, I'm Stuart Taylor, channel partner and account manager for Maple Fleet Services, and today, with my colleague Paul Nunn, who's marketing manager for Maple, we're going to talk about how jump-up thefts have plagued the UK supply chain and how fleet managers have been able to fight back. Before we move on to that, I want to talk a little bit about the company that we work for and the emphasis that we place on research and development. So we're a team of between 50 and 60 people, and we have a large team of people that work within R&D. It's not just about the research and development of the products that we manufacture, but also the in-house testing that we conduct. And that is to make sure that we truly understand what our clients need and how robust the products need to be in order to keep the organised criminal gangs at bay from attacking your vehicles. As I say, we also invested a few years ago in a manufacturing facility that makes us more responsive and improves our lead times when it comes to providing product to our clients. And I'm pleased to say that next year we'll celebrate 50 years of business, having been formed in 1974, and we're a third generation family business. I should also say we're very proud to have supported TAPA for almost 16 years as an SSP since 2007.
So, as Stuart says, today's session is going to focus on jump-up theft and how it's been targeting and affecting supply chains here in the UK for around about the last 5 or 6 years. The hallmarks of the modus operandi involve targeting final mile delivery vehicles, usually as they're en route to store or retail outlets. The offenders are focusing on the pursuit of theft-attractive product, and primarily this is going to be tobacco related. The tactic itself sees offenders approach vehicles as they are reaching their delivery points, usually during slow-moving traffic, when they're stationary at traffic signals, or even when they're at the store itself, when the driver may be involved with paperwork, or even has entered the store to notify the manager of his arrival. At which point, the offenders will literally jump up onto the rear of the vehicle and enter the cargo area to target the tobacco product. Thanks to some good work that's been done here by NAVSIS in the UK under Operation Ash, they've been mapping that threat and have been able to profile the offenders themselves as well. So we know of the near 1,000 reported incidents over the last 24 months, that the vast majority of those can be attributed to very specific small numbers of OCGs. It's also important to differentiate that a jump-up theft should not be classified in the same way of a theft from a moving vehicle or a Romanian MO that we often speak about. That is usually conducted at high speed, often with converted vehicles to facilitate that theft. But the jump-up theft is very different and shows very specific characteristics.
So let's examine a little bit about what the catalyst might have been for this type of crime to be conducted in the UK. Prior to 2017, there were ad hoc sporadic times where this happened. However, in 2017, a specialist and large distribution company within the UK called Parman Harvey went into administration. And whilst it would be unfair to say that their clients, supermarkets and retailers, had not seen that coming, it would be probably quite accurate to suggest that they were ill-prepared to take on the role and responsibility of distributing those goods in the demise and the shadow of P&H. Effectively, Parman Harvey were a long-time client of Maple Fleet Services and had a fleet of vehicles which had been on a journey with us and other security providers to reinforce their vehicles. Effectively, we were providing a large different amount of product and equipment, which we can show you in the next slide. So we assisted Parman Harvey applying product to all of their different types of vehicles, which range from smaller vans to medium-sized rigid vehicles and large articulated trailers. On this particular slide, what you can see is we provided them with an alarm system which had a backup battery function, remote access control for the alarm system and the locking. There were two types of locks on the rear doors, one which looked at load integrity with digital seal numbers, and the other which focused more on pure robustness from a violent attack, and also a trailer immobiliser system which prevented the trailer from being collected incorrectly by the wrong driver or by a fictitious driver. On the rear doors, just out of interest, the locking was a bit of a journey in its own right, really, because we originally applied a single point lock at the top of the door, which was effective, but as the violence of the OCGs increased and as their techniques went from basic hand tools to battery powered tools to using forklift trucks even, we were in turn forced to apply additional locking at both sides of what it was a predominantly roller shutter door fleet. And then again a final and a third lock at the bottom handle, which really did create a robust application which stopped the OCGs in their tracks.
Let's now look with a little bit more detail at the series of jump up thefts that have been affecting UK supply chains over the last 5 or 6 years and how that threat has evolved too. As we've heard, the first incidents were triggered by a change in the landscape for the distribution of tobacco across the UK region. As a consequence, we now saw a number of different carriers taking responsibility for their own delivery of tobacco into store locations. And as a result, it was something that the organised criminal gangs, the OCGs, were very quick to identify and act upon. Now, obviously, these carriers already had very well established distribution channels, but what they weren't experienced with was being targeted specifically by OCGs. As a consequence, the vehicles that they utilised had only very basic or low-level security measures in place. It was common to have things like cable seals, for example, that may give indication or notification that somebody had gained entry, but did little to deter or thwart any criminal activity. As a result of this, and as a consequence, we quickly found that a number of carriers were very highly exposed and were victims of quite a number of attacks in a very short period of time. Now, initially, the majority of those attacks could be confined or identified and mapped in the London region, probably motivated by the sheer volume of different carriers operating in that area, the numbers of vehicles on the roads, and the sheer weight of deliveries on a daily basis. As a consequence, as we say, carriers were soon subjected to frequent attack, and in many instances were suffering quite significant losses as a result of these attacks, almost on a daily or weekly basis. So before long, and understandably, the carriers started to adapt to this and started to implement measures to minimise the risk that they were faced with. Now, some of this were changes operationally, so we saw differences in the way that they would load tobacco on vehicles, for example. Initially, little consideration had been afforded to where that would be positioned or how it would be concealed. So better attempts to do that, to disguise where it was placed on the vehicle, to position it so it was further back against the bulkhead, for example, and therefore if perpetrators were successful in gaining entry to a cargo area, it was far more difficult and time consuming for them to find or locate the tobacco. The measures that carriers put in place also extended to physical deterrence as well. So we started to see padlocks introduced and key operated locks, for example, that hadn't previously been specified on their vehicles. But some of this may be considered reactionary, and little consideration was afforded to the methods of access control, for example. So with a large number of vehicles often on fleet for carriers, they had to consider what impact this would have on loading and unloading efficiencies. With a number of different people requiring access, a lot of operators therefore decided to implement suited keys or single key access. And this itself provided a vulnerability in so much that one key enabled access to a number of different vehicles. Of course, it wasn't just the carriers that adapted, so too the OCGs. Initially, when one carrier reacted to introduce different security measures or changes in procedures, They may have short-term success, and they manage to move that threat on to a different carrier. Often that was short-lived though. Although the OCG's focus may temporarily turn to another carrier, if they could identify vulnerabilities or weaknesses in any of the security measures that are being put in place, then they were quick to expose that. One such example can be traced back to key management, for example, as we've just mentioned. So some carriers implemented padlocks or key security locks, but they were handled by single key operation. And there were numerous examples where we saw OCGs literally turn up with keys and gain access to vehicles. So the introduction of these new security measures almost worked against the carriers as a result of that. Now, as we mentioned initially, in the first few years of these number of attacks, the majority of incidents have been contained to the London area. But we've now seen plenty of examples where that threat has now migrated north as well. So we've seen incidents in the northwest and across over to the east coast in the Yorkshire regions as well. We've also seen OCGs undertake their own surveillance, conducting stakeouts outside distribution centres, identifying vehicle routes, and in many cases they've been captured trailing those vehicles often for quite some distances, to 2-3 hours at a time, before they're able to identify an opportunity to carry out one of the jump up style techniques. So we can see that there have been a number of changes over this last 5 or 6 years. We can see and map the evolution that has happened during this period of time as well. I think one of the clear things that we can take from this, that it is important that carriers assess the risk. It is important they make procedural changes, and it's important that when they do put security measures in place, that they are fully considered, they are suitable, and they are fit for purpose. Otherwise, that threat is going to come back around. We're going to see this cyclical effect continue. And I'll hand over to Stuart, who will look at that in a bit more detail with you.
Okay, so we've talked about the problem, why it's occurred, the journey that some of the carriers that have been on in a probably a reactive way. Let's talk about the solution, if there is such a thing. It would be folly for me to stand here and say now that you can purchase a service or a product from us or from any other company that would act as a silver bullet and make all the problems go away. It's not the case. The reality of the situation is that it needs a layered approach, as with all security decisions and considerations. There needs to be a multitude of tangible physical products, some services and some back-end processes that bring together a cohesive solution to really combat and fight against these OCGs. Having said that, the way that we choose to break that down within Maple Fleet is to look at 3 core fundamentals that should be considered before making a decision. So in our world, that is starting with physical security. What is the physical, let's say, lock or alarm or immobilizer that is suitable for the vehicle type that you've got? And I'm privileged to work for a company that's got a broad product offering built up over the last 50 years that can cater for a small van, a truck, a trailer, a tractor unit. You kind of name the type of container or application that you've got, and there is a very good chance that we've already got a product that we've designed in the last 50 years that will cater for that. And if we haven't already got it, as I said earlier, we've got an extensive R&D facility, both electronic and mechanical, that can cater for that. So that's one element of it. The second element, for me, is probably the most interesting, because I think it's the element which is least considered, given the least consideration, certainly in a reactive way, and that's access control. So if we do consider that fleets have been plunged into the idea of having to carry a high-risk product at short notice because of the administration of a pre-existing provider like Power & Harvey, yes, they were able to quickly retrofit locking apparatus to their rear doors, as an example, but that brought another problem with it, because what they decided to do in a very reactive way was have either one key or a key suite of limited key numbers to hundreds, if not thousands, of vehicles. So can you imagine a situation where you've got 1,500 trucks, but then tens of thousands of the same key profile in circulation in retail outlets, shopping centres, distribution centres, maybe with the vehicles themselves, with the drivers. And that in its own right is a headache for any operator. So we take a great focus and emphasis on access control and which is going to be the right type of solution for your business. So we will spend a long time talking to you, not only about locking the doors or providing an alarm system or an immobilizer like that, but then understanding which access control is going to have least impact operationally for you and present a limited amount of risk. And the third kind of pillar of cargo security that we would talk about then is data and the role that data is going to play. So, as I said at the beginning of this, there's no silver bullet. So if we work on the basis that there will be the worst possible day, there will be a situation, even with this physical security and access control there is still a day where you lose some product, where a trailer is stolen, where an alarm doesn't sound for some reason. Okay, what tools have we then got to give you to help your business understand why that happened, how to get your cargo back, and how to prevent it again happening in the future? And the answer to that is the data. So we record the door open and closed events, seal number changes, which key was used, whether it was a key or whether it was done remotely. There can be CCTV inputs, telemetry. So that data then really takes the application of not just a product, but turns it into a full system which can be layered on top of your fleet. And then in this slide, we really take what is discussed as a concept, if you like, those three pillars, those three concepts for discussion, and we kind of turn it into what is effectively hardware. So in the first picture, what you can see is it happens to be a barn door, but we do the same for a roller shutter door, which is a twin freight lock application. So the lock is internally mounted in what we would deem to be the clean, dry area of the vehicle, rather than being on the outside and exposed to that danger. It's also more secure by being on the inside. Okay, but there's a lock at the bottom of the door and a lock at the top. And it's those little bit of details that we've learned over the last 50 years that really help us give an edge. So when we see those jump up thefts, one of the things that when we've watched that footage back is we can tell that yes, the thieves will carry hand tools. It might be even a battery operated hand tool. What they don't tend to carry are ladders. And whilst that might sound kind of humorous, the reality is if the locking solution that you have is internally mounted and at the top of the door, that does make it all the more difficult for that criminal to gain access to your fleet. The middle picture is an example of a type of access control that we have. Just one example. That's key validation, and that was something that was developed relatively recently for a large UK supermarket, a retailer, who suffered exactly this kind of attack and didn't want to integrate telemetry and didn't want the complexities that sometimes come up with remote access control, but still wanted a situation where they could have a large number of vehicles with our product fitted, but then have an even larger number of RFID tags in circulation, but without the risk of those tags being lost or stolen and posing a risk of somebody else having access to their vehicles. So what we designed was a validation unit, whereby when the driver is given the keys to their vehicles at the beginning of a shift, their Maple fob, their RFID tag, is validated for a predetermined amount of time. So if it's lost in that time frame, let's say that's 12 hours, yes, there is a 12-hour window of opportunity, but beyond that, there is no opportunity for a would-be criminal to access their fleet of vehicles in any way. And you could argue that that's not perfect because it still gives them a window, and that's true. But it's trying to find a balance that looks after budget, that looks after lead time, because this product needs to be rolled out very quickly, and also has as little impact as possible on the operations of the pre-existing business. And the third image there is an example of our web portal. So again, where all of these other facets of the product come together, the access control and the physical lock itself, that's then delivered within the web portal so that our client can dial in at any time and understand who accessed the vehicle, how long it was accessed for, and lots of other pieces of information as well. So I think that just leaves me really to say to you, ask you the question of whether you believe your fleet is well covered with regards to those three core principles of cargo security, and to thank you for joining us today. And if you do have any questions, then you can contact us. Thank you.
And thank you to Stuart and the team at Maple for their insight into a topic that will be of particular interest to many of our delegates tuning in today. And once again, as Maple is one of Tapper EMEA's 2023 Premier Partners, you can meet them now in our virtual exhibition if you'd like to know more.